Ever get this feeling like the rules of the game are like totally rigged, but like no one's talking about it?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Well, get ready, because today we are going deep on some seriously thought-provoking stuff.
All right.
Excerpts from the Civil War with no ending.
Oh, interesting.
With a laser focus on this document called the Lieber Code.
Oh.
From what I've read.
Yeah.
It's basically a set of rules written during the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
But the author, April Reigne,
Yeah.
suggests it might still be shaping our world in ways we don't even realize.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's definitely a fascinating and potentially unsettling rabbit hole to go down.
Okay.
The Lieber Code was essentially a guide for the Union Army on how to govern occupied territory back in 1863.
Okay.
But Reigne argues that many of its provisions, particularly those related to martial law, have had a lasting impact on our legal system and government power, and not necessarily in a good way.
That's what hooked me, too. I mean, Article 1 just straight up says,
what's it say?
Any occupied territory is under martial law, whether it's officially declared or not. So, thinking about the Civil War, were all the states considered occupied?
Oh, interesting.
And therefore under military rule?
That's precisely Reigne's argument.
Wow.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at Article 2, which states that only the commander-in-chief can end martial law.
Really?
Reigne claims she couldn't find any record of it being officially lifted after the Civil War.
So if you follow that logic, are we technically still living under martial law?
It's possible.
Even though most people have no idea.
Yeah, that's her argument.
That's kind of blowing my mind a little.
I know, it's pretty wild.
And if that's the case, what does that mean for our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Reigne doesn't shy away from exploring those implications. For example, Article 3 states that under martial law, military authority essentially supersedes civil and criminal law. Really? I'm curious.
Yeah?
How does that make you feel? Knowing a document from 1863 could potentially override laws we take for granted today.
Honestly, a bit unsettling. I mean, think about all the rights we assume are untouchable. Freedom of speech, assembly, right, to a fair trial.
Right.
Article 3 suggests those could all be swept aside under martial law.
It's a possibility, according to Reigne.
Is there any historical context or legal precedent that sheds light on how this actually played out during the Civil War?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something historians and legal scholars still debate.
Okay.
Some argue that while the Lieber Code allowed for martial law, it wasn't intended to be a blank check for the military to do whatever they wanted.
Right.
There were supposed to be limits, a balance between military necessity and individual rights.
Okay.
But of course, how those limits were interpreted and enforced in the heat of battle is another matter entirely.
Right, and how that compares to modern interpretations of martial law is another layer on top of that.
Exactly.
Speaking of limits, or maybe the lack thereof, Article 7 takes this idea of military authority even further. It states that martial law applies to everyone and everything.
Everyone and everything.
Citizens, foreigners.
Wow.
Property, even your own body.
Your own body.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah.
And it feeds directly into Reigne's argument about the far-reaching implications of the Lieber Code. She sees this article as a justification for all sorts of government overreach.
Like what?
From the suspension of habeas corpus to the use of eminent domain to seize private property.
And that segues perfectly into Article 37, which specifically says the government can take your home, land, or even a church.
What?
For temporary military use. I mean, how temporary is temporary, really?
Right.
Reigne seems to think this is where the whole concept of property taxes stems from.
She does.
Wow.
And her reasoning, while controversial, is thought-provoking. If the government can claim ownership of all property during wartime, as Article 31 allows, then what's to stop them from continuing that practice even after the war is officially over? She sees property taxes as a sort of ongoing tribute we pay to a government that never truly relinquished its wartime authority.
I can see how someone might arrive at that conclusion, even if I'm not entirely convinced myself.
Yeah.
But it's a powerful argument for sure.
It is.
And it raises some interesting questions about the true nature of ownership and the balance of power between individuals and the state.
That's a big one.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a question we all need to grapple with.
Yeah.
Reigne's interpretation of the Lieber Code may be extreme, but it does force us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
Right.
About the potential for government overreach.
Okay.
Even in a democracy. And it makes you wonder, how much power are we comfortable ceding to the state in the name of security?
That's the crux of it, isn't it?
It really is.
And it's not just a theoretical debate.
Right.
Reigne connects these seemingly obscure articles to things happening in our world right now.
Like what?
Surveillance programs, the militarization of police, even restrictions on free speech in the name of national security.
She sees it all connected.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She argues that the Lieber Code has, in a sense, created a blueprint for a perpetual state of war, where the government can justify almost any action in the name of protecting its citizens.
And we, as citizens, may be so caught up in our daily lives that we don't even realize the extent to which our freedoms are being eroded.
That's the danger she's highlighting.
Wow.
And she's not just pointing fingers.
Okay.
She's offering a potential solution.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay.
What does she propose we do about this?
Her solution is radical, to say the least.
Okay.
She believes that to truly break free from this perpetual state of war, we need a formal treaty of peace.
A treaty?
Between the states and the federal government.
Really?
A document that explicitly declares the Civil War over and restores the balance of power.
Whoa, that's a pretty big ask.
It is.
Is that even something that could realistically happen?
It's certainly a long shot. But Reigne argues that it's a necessary step.
Okay.
If we want to reclaim our freedoms and limit the government's power. She sees it as a way to formally renounce the Lieber Code and its enduring influence on our legal system and culture.
I'm not sure how I feel about rewriting history like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold idea.
But I can see the appeal, especially if it means potentially restoring some of the freedoms we've lost.
Right. It's a thought-provoking proposition, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of debate, there's another aspect of the Lieber Code that caught my eye.
Okay, what's that?
Its stance on slavery.
Oh, interesting.
It seems pretty progressive for a document written in 1863. Article 42 flat out states,
let's hear it,
that the law of nature and nations has never acknowledged slavery.
Wow.
That's a bold statement considering the context.
It is, especially for that time period. Remember, the Civil War was raging at the time.
Right.
And the issue of slavery was at its very core. Yet here in the Lieber Code, we have a clear condemnation of the practice.
Wow.
It's almost as if they're acknowledging a fundamental human right. That transcends the conflict itself.
And Article 43 takes it even further.
Okay.
It states that anyone escaping slavery into U.S.-controlled territory is instantly free, and returning them would be a grave offense.
Wow.
It almost seems to foreshadow the Emancipation Proclamation, which wouldn't come until the following year.
It's a fascinating example of how, even in the midst of a brutal war, there can be a push for progress, for recognizing basic human rights.
It definitely makes you think.
It does.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this Lieber Code is more than just a dusty old document.
Yeah.
It's a window into some fundamental questions.
Like what?
About power, freedom, and the very nature of our society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And whether you agree with Reigne's conclusions or not, her analysis of the Lieber Code is a powerful reminder that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks.
Right.
It can have a profound impact on the world we live in today.
Wow.
Even if we're not aware of it.
That's a powerful takeaway, for sure.
It is.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about martial law, property rights, slavery, and the potential for a perpetual state of war.
It's a lot to digest.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Really?
There's so much more to unpack in the Lieber Code. And in Reigne's analysis of it, I'm sure we'll have plenty more to discuss as we delve deeper.
You got that right. We've got a whole lot more to uncover in the Civil War with no ending.
Okay.
Including Reigne's claims about a cover-up involving President Davis.
Oh, wow.
Stay tuned, because things are about to get really interesting.
I can't wait.
Okay, so we've just scratched the surface of this whole Lieber Code thing.
Yeah.
And already my mind is kind of blown.
It's a lot to take in.
Reigne is making some bold claims, connecting it to everything from property taxes to government surveillance.
It's all connected in her view.
Right, and she doesn't stop there. Her exploration of the Lieber Code goes even deeper.
Deeper? Where does she go from here?
Touching on the very nature of war, treaties, and what it means to be a citizen in a nation that may still technically be at war with itself.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to unpack, but let's dive into some more specifics.
Okay, I'm ready.
Reigne spends considerable amount of time in the book discussing treaties.
Treaties?
Their historical significance, their legal weight.
Okay.
Almost as if they're the key to understanding this whole tangled web.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear where she goes with that.
Yeah.
It sounds like she's going deep on the legal stuff.
That's a great observation.
Thanks.
For Reigne, treaties are more than just agreements between nations.
Okay.
She sees them as the foundation upon which power is established and balanced.
Power.
Both on an international level and within a nation itself. She argues that treaties define the very relationship between a government and its people.
So she's saying that treaties are like the rule book for how a government interacts with its citizens.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big deal.
And she keeps coming back to the fact that there was never a formal treaty ending the Civil War, right?
Right. The South surrendered.
I mean, we know the South surrendered, but is she saying that without a treaty, the conflict never truly ended from a legal standpoint?
That's precisely her argument.
Really?
And she points to the U.S. Constitution, which explicitly states that treaties are the supreme law of the land.
Okay.
So if there's no treaty formally ending the Civil War, she suggests, then technically, the legal framework established by the Lieber Code could still be in effect.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
But I could see how she's connecting the dots.
Right. It all ties together.
So in her view, the absence of a treaty creates this kind of legal gray area.
A gray area, huh?
It's this loophole where the Lieber Code, with all its provisions about martial law and government power, can continue to exert its influence.
It's like a shadow government operating in the background.
Exactly.
Wow.
And she doesn't just rely on the Lieber Code to support her argument.
Okay, what else does she bring in?
She brings in other historical documents as well.
Interesting, like what?
One that she highlights is Senate Resolution 62 from 1933.
Okay.
Also known as Senate Document 43.
I vaguely remember reading about that.
Yeah. It had something to do with debt repayment during the Great Depression, right?
Right.
But what does that have to do with the Lieber Code and this whole idea of a perpetual state of war?
It's all about ownership and control.
Ownership and control.
The Senate resolution dealt with whether people could be forced to pay their debts in gold, even though the government had abandoned the gold standard.
Right.
But there's a particular passage in that document that Reigne latches onto.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state.
Okay.
Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government.
So essentially the government is claiming ultimate ownership of everything.
I.e. law and subordinate to the necessities of the state.
Wow. That's a pretty bold statement.
Okay, now I see the connection.
Yeah.
She's tying this back to Article 31 of the Lieber Code.
The one about seizing property during wartime.
Which allows the government to seize all public property during wartime.
Right. She's essentially saying that the government never relinquished that claim of ownership.
Even after the war supposedly ended.
Exactly.
So she's building a case for a sort of shadow ownership by the state.
Precisely.
That's pretty wild.
She argues that this principle, first articulated during the Civil War, became embedded in our legal system, even if it's not explicitly stated.
So it's like a hidden rule that everyone's playing by, but no one's acknowledging.
And she sees things like property taxes as a manifestation of that underlying principle.
Property taxes.
A kind of perpetual tribute we pay to a government that never truly relinquished its wartime authority.
Wow. I never thought of property taxes that way.
It's definitely a thought-provoking perspective.
It is.
I mean, most of us never question why we pay property taxes.
Right. We just pay them.
We just accept it as part of the system.
Yeah, it's like a fact of life.
But Reigne is forcing us to look at it through a different lens.
A new perspective.
To question the very foundation of that system.
It's like she's pulling back the curtain and revealing the wizard behind it all.
And that's what makes her work so compelling.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Even if you don't agree with all her conclusions.
Yeah, even if you think she's a little out there, it makes you think.
She's challenging us to think critically about the power structures that shape our lives, the historical forces that continue to influence our present, and the potential for things to be different.
It's a call to action in a way.
She also doesn't shy away from suggesting that this principle of state ownership extends beyond just physical property.
Beyond physical property, what else could they own?
She connects it to things like intellectual property, data privacy, even our own bodies, which circles back to Article 7 of the Lieber Code.
The one that says martial law applies to everything.
Right.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
But she's suggesting that in a perpetual state of war, the boundaries between individual freedom and state control become increasingly blurred.
So she's painting a pretty bleak picture.
It's a bit dystopian.
But she also acknowledges that not everyone will buy into her interpretation of history and the law.
Of course not everyone's going to agree with her.
In fact, she encourages readers to do their own research.
That's good. At least she's encouraging critical thinking.
Providing a whole list of additional documents to explore.
Oh, wow. Like what kind of documents?
From the Articles of Confederation to letters from early American settlers.
So she's really covering a wide range of historical sources.
That's what I admire about her approach.
I can see why you find it intriguing.
She's not trying to preach or dictate a particular viewpoint.
She's just laying out her research.
She's presenting her analysis, backing it up with evidence, and then inviting readers to delve deeper.
To go down the rabbit hole themselves.
To draw their own conclusions.
That's a respectable approach.
It's almost as if she's saying, here's my take on things.
Yeah.
But don't just take my word for it.
Right.
Go explore for yourself.
I like that.
It's a powerful approach and one that resonates with our whole deep dive philosophy.
It does fit with our approach.
I mean, we're all about encouraging critical thinking and intellectual curiosity.
Well, right. We're not here to tell people what to think, just to give them the tools to think for themselves.
Exactly. And that's why Reigne's work.
Yeah.
Even if controversial.
It's definitely sparked a lot of debate.
It is so valuable.
It's definitely gotten people talking.
It sparks a conversation.
Yeah.
Challenges assumptions. And pushes us to engage with history in a more meaningful way.
It makes history relevant to our lives today.
All right, we've gone deep into Reigne's argument.
We have.
Exploring the Lieber Code, the missing treaty,
right,
and the potential for a perpetual state of war.
It's a lot to process.
But what about the other side of the coin?
The counter-arguments.
Are there counter-arguments to her claims?
There are, and we'll explore those in depth when we come back.
Okay.
We'll delve into the perspectives of legal scholars who disagree with Reigne's interpretation.
Okay.
And we'll tackle the big question.
What's that?
Even if Reigne is right, what can we realistically do about it?
All right, so we've explored April Reigne's take on the Lieber Code.
Yeah, a document from 1863 that she believes is still shaping our world today.
But let's be honest, her claims are pretty provocative, to say the least.
Definitely thought-provoking.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
Are there other perspectives on this? Maybe some counter-arguments to consider?
Absolutely.
Okay.
While Reigne's analysis is thought-provoking, not everyone agrees with her conclusions.
Okay.
There are legal scholars and historians who offer alternative interpretations.
Okay.
Some even calling her take a bit of a conspiracy theory.
Okay, lay it on us.
Okay.
What are some of the main counter-arguments to Reigne's claims?
One of the most common critiques is that the Lieber Code, while significant in its historical context, simply doesn't hold the same legal weight today as it did during the Civil War.
So they're saying it's basically irrelevant in the modern legal landscape.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
They argue that the Lieber Code was intended as a set of wartime regulations meant to guide the Union Army in a very specific situation once the war ended.
Okay.
Even without a formal treaty.
Yeah.
Those regulations ceased to have the same binding power.
So it's like saying the rules of a board game don't apply once you've put the game away.
Exactly.
Okay.
These critics also point out that the legal landscape has evolved dramatically since 1863.
Right. Things have changed.
We have new laws,
Yeah.
new court precedents, a whole body of constitutional interpretation that has developed over time.
Okay.
They argue that Reigne is fixated on this one document while ignoring the broader context of legal evolution.
So the Lieber Code might be a historical artifact, but not a legal blueprint for our current system.
That's their perspective.
Okay.
They also take issue with Reigne's interpretation of things like property taxes and government overreach.
Okay.
They argue that she's cherry-picking certain phrases and passages from the Lieber Code and other documents to fit her narrative.
So she might be connecting dots that aren't really there, seeing patterns that don't actually exist.
It's possible.
Okay.
And then there's the question of practicality.
Yeah, practicality.
Even if we were to accept Reine's argument that the Civil War is technically still ongoing,
right?
What can we realistically do about it?
Yeah, drafting a treaty of peace between the states and the federal government.
Right.
Seems like a pretty far-fetched idea.
It would be a logistical nightmare.
I mean, how would that even work?
Exactly. Yeah. It would be an incredibly complex and politically charged undertaking.
Right.
And some might argue that it's unnecessary.
Okay.
Even if symbolically powerful.
Right.
They might say, look, the war ended over 150 years ago.
Right.
We've moved on. Let's focus on present-day challenges.
Okay, so there are definitely different ways of looking at this.
Yeah.
Some might dismiss Reine's work as conspiracy theory, while others might find it a valuable, albeit controversial, lens through which to view our current system.
A new perspective.
Right, and it's important to acknowledge that Reine's work has sparked a lot of debate and discussion.
It has. It's gotten people talking.
Some people find her analysis compelling and eye-opening, while others find it far-fetched and alarmist.
It's definitely polarizing.
But I think regardless of where you land on the spectrum, her book raises some important questions.
It does make you think.
That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Even if you don't buy into the whole perpetual state of war argument.
Right.
Reigne forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
Uncomfortable, but important.
About the balance of power in our society.
Yeah.
The limits of a government authority. And the importance of safeguarding individual liberties.
It's a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
What can we as individuals do to address these issues, even if we don't agree with Reine's proposed solutions?
No, knowledge is power, right?
It is.
Reigne provides a wealth of resources in her book.
She does.
And there are countless others available online and in libraries.
Right. There's so much information out there.
The more we understand our history, our legal system, and the principles of good governance, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for our rights.
Absolutely.
And push for positive change.
It's about being informed and engaged citizens.
It's like that saying, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty.
Right.
We can't just sit back and assume our freedoms will always be protected.
We have to be active participants in our democracy.
We have to actively engage with these issues.
Exactly.
We can get involved in our communities,
Yeah.
support organizations that are fighting for civil liberties, and make our voices heard through peaceful and lawful means.
It's about making our voices count.
It's important to remember that we do have a voice.
We do.
And we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
by having these conversations, by challenging assumptions, and by demanding transparency from our leaders.
It's about holding our leaders accountable.
We can create a more just and equitable society for all.
That's the goal.
Even if the Civil War isn't technically over,
Right.
as Reigne suggests, we can still fight for the principles of freedom and justice that were at stake back then.
It's an ongoing struggle.
Well said.
Thanks.
This has been a truly mind-bending deep dive.
It has.
Into the Lieber Code and its potential implications for our world today.
A lot to think about.
If you're as intrigued by this as we are,
Yeah.
we highly recommend checking out April Reine's book, The Civil War with No Ending.
It's definitely worth a read.
It's a challenging read.
It is.
But it will definitely make you think.
It'll get the wheels turning.
And as always,
Yeah.
we encourage you to do your own research.
Right. Don't just take our word for it.
Draw your own conclusions and engage in respectful dialogue with others who may have different perspectives.
It's all about having those open and honest conversations.
Because that's what a healthy democracy is all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep diving deep.
Keep learning.
And keep questioning everything.
Always question everything.